All right, time to get started. Thank you everybody for coming out today to this ProPlayAI PitchAI webinar. I hope all of you have had a chance to take a look at some of our materials. I really encourage everybody to go to the website, take a look at some of the educational materials we have. We're putting together more. We're going to have more videos for you in the upcoming weeks. But Mike Sonne put together a really great course. You actually get a fancy certificate when you pass, and tons of great information there. So I'll make sure everybody has the link at the end. But again, thanks for coming to this. What I'm going to do today is talk for about 10-15 minutes about that first video you take. I'm sure some of you have already done that, but I want to make sure that what we're seeing and what you're getting is what you need, and to make sure that you understand the thing. So I'm going to go through a couple reports, make sure that you understand these, make sure that you're getting the right information, because this is all so new to everybody. One of the things I keep telling people is we don't know a lot of this stuff because we've never been able to measure it. If you're a pitching coach, if you're a baseball coach, you know that 5-6 years ago, if somebody had said spin rate to you, you would have been thinking astronomy, not baseball. What did spin rate mean? And over those past 5 years, we've absolutely turned that into a thing. I think general baseball fans at least have a concept of what spin rate is. And with biomechanics, maybe people have a slight concept of it through video games or movies. But when it comes to sports, I don't think even most of us understand what's yet important, because we're just getting this out in the field. We're getting it to the coaches in a way that it's never been before. I'm sure a lot of you that are at colleges or involved in the professional ranks have seen some biomechanics. Glenn Fleissig has been doing it for years. Arnel Aguinaldo out in California has been doing it for years. But putting this tool in the field has really opened up. We love to say we've democratized biomechanics. We've been able to collect all this. And like you, we're learning as we go. So let's go through a quick report here. I'm going to share my screen and have a quick one of a guy I'm sure you'll recognize. This is Stephen Hajar. Can everybody see that?
Looks like Kumar Rocker.
Oh, we got Kumar up on the screen.
Yeah.
Thanks. And for everybody, this is Dr. Mike Sonne. So there we go. All right, trying to find the right screen here. There we go. So we've got Kumar Rocker, obviously the number 10 pick overall. Did the Mets get a deal? Well, we think yes, because his biomechanics are really good. We pick him up here. We didn't have the beginning of this pitch, but we were able to get him what I think is out of the stretch and something of a half slide step. You can see with his knee height here, only 28. That's low for a power pitcher like him. But that is the peak kick. And you'll see this in every report. There are 4 points where you're going to see these pause. And as we go through, you'll see this unpause, and he'll move to the next step. And there are a number of things you'll see here. Again, you see the stride length. Again, we've all talked about this. Now we can accurately measure it rather than saying to a pitcher, I know one of the things I always did when they got a good stride length, I would mark it in the dirt there on the mound and say, step here again, step in your own footprint. Now we can get a very accurate measure of that. We see his knee flexion, and that's important as to where you're landing in something of a stable position and able to extend that leg rapidly. Again, hip-shoulder separation is another thing that we've talked about for years. We knew we needed to do it, but we didn't have an accurate way of measuring it in the field. You can do it with goniometers, but that's laying on a table. It doesn't exactly work. Final measure you see here is shoulder abduction, which is how far the shoulder is removed from the body. You also see the path of what's actually the wrist, but a lot of people will call ball path. Moving forward from here, we get to the third stop point, which gives us two measures. First is external rotation, which is a lot of pitching coaches will call this layback. It's that very unstable position, looks painful, but every pitcher knows that it's not. It's a loaded position and one that can't accurately be measured on the table. If you have physical therapists or your athletic trainers try to measure this on the table, they're going to get a very different number because it's an athletic move and it's a loaded athletic move, although the load is only a 5-ounce ball. Again, you'll see the wrist measurement is what's being measured, not the ball. You can see the slight difference, and I'll let Mike explain the biomechanics of that, but it still gives us a very good idea because the ball does not stray far from the wrist at any point. The final number here is peak elbow torque, and this is one we actually got a question on prior to this from somebody who couldn't make it. Peak elbow torque is the stress being exerted on the ulnar collateral ligament, the so-called Tommy John ligament. And with that, you have to understand that we don't understand the mechanics of this. In study after study, we see that 35 to 40 Newton meters of force will break a UCL in a lab. If that's the case, then nobody should be able to pitch. And we can see with numbers like this, and they're higher, this is a pretty close to median score, a little bit higher. But what this really gives you is not whether or not the UCL is going to break, it kind of gives you a guide to how much should someone be pitching. If someone has a really high peak elbow torque, first, you're going to work to try to get them more efficient. And second, you're going to kind of watch the guys with that red flag a little bit more. Maybe they shouldn't be pitching as much. Maybe you're going to have to build them up to a different standard. So that's the final number on that screen. Here we are with the final one, and you see a number of great things here, including the knee extension velocity. This is another one of those new numbers that we haven't been able to accurately measure outside the lab. We see this time, which is in milliseconds, right? It's a little bit confusing. Sometimes you see meters per second here on the peak arm speed. You see milliseconds here. This is the time it takes somebody to pitch, which is from that peak kick to ball release. So 654, again, a pretty darn good time, especially because his peak kick was low here. So that's on the low end of the scale. Peak arm speed is exactly what it sounds like. And this is one of those things that we're really excited about. Peak arm speed is exactly that. This is that measure of where the arm through the pitching motion is getting to its top speed, imparting that to the ball, getting that out. And it's a great measure in efficiency, in power, in velocity, and it's one that's going to give you a lot of insight. Now, there's not a very broad range. I think the top that we had was about 27 meters per second, and the lowest in our sample was somewhere around 17. So 23, you get a good idea that Kumar Rocker is pretty darn good. Let me switch to another one that we've seen and walk you through the same ones. This is Stephen Hajar. Can everyone see that one?
Not quite yet. Might just need to share a different window.
Yeah, that's what I thought I did. How about that one?
Maybe just like stop sharing and then reshare.
Are we seeing him now?
Ooh, I think you might need one more click.
No, no such luck. How about now?
There he is.
There he
There we
is.
go.
Okay. Same thing here. We're seeing a lefty and this is a different setup. Obviously, he's in the lab. This is at Kinetic Pro down in Florida. Hajar was drafted by the Twins, I think, in the second or third round. But a guy who really came up was one of the guys that came from the MLB Combine this year. So you see, again, trunk flexion. You see the peak knee height and the knee flexion. Obviously, one of the things with knee flexion, the higher you bring it up, the more you're going to have to flex it. You don't often see guys with low flexion here unless you're doing something along the lines of a Bronson Arroyo, and that's unusual. As it unpauses a foot plant here, again, you're going to see stride length, great stride length. And that 94% isn't a percentile. That is the comparison of the length of his stride to his height. Again, you're seeing knee flexion, hip shoulder separation, which is elite level, shoulder abduction, which is a little bit less than Rocker, but certainly within the realm of elite pitchers. He moves to maximum external rotation here. Again, you see Newton meters of force, which is slightly lower, and an external rotation, which is extremely high. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's neither good nor bad. It's just one of those things you have to monitor. Certainly changes in that might indicate some problems. If you see guys with glenohumeral humeral internal rotation deficit, easy for me to say, that's one of the first signs you're going to get. And moving forward to ball release, again, you see an elite level peak arm speed for him, an elite level knee extension, a little slower here, which may be partly because he's in a lab versus the game film we saw from Rocker. And the ball path length, again, is compared to the average. So I'll unshare that one. So those are the things we look for in that, and with these two elite level pitchers, that's fairly easy. So let's look at one last report, and this is for you that work with youth pitchers. This might be more what you're used to. Move this one back. Can you see this one? Good. Okay, unfortunately, this video, the head's a little cut off, so we don't get all of it, but still very good biomechanic report here. You see him coming through peak kick. I'll pull this back just a little bit to get to that peak kick. This one doesn't have the graphics on there, but you can see that it's capturing a very good balance point for him. He's moving forward. At foot plant, you can again see that you're not getting nearly the extension. You're not getting nearly the stride length with him. The interesting thing is if you follow the wrist path here, you can see that it bounces up. And we've always said, don't pitch uphill. This kid is actually pitching uphill in a way. He's having to bring it down. Don't know the result of this pitch, but as you see in this motion, as he's coming up with, which is created by the body lean here, you can see he's kicking off to the side. His head is unstable. He's actually pitching uphill and releases up here behind his peak arm speed. So a lot of things to work on. There's a lot of good things with this kid, but also a lot of things to work on. So hopefully two elite pitchers, one maybe someday elite pitcher, gives you an idea about that. Mike, do you have anything to add on what people should be looking for on these initial reports?
No, I think that's a relatively thorough approach to it. So that overlay B that we call it internally that Will was showing where it does the stop motion, you can access that video when you go to a completed report, and in the top right-hand corner, there are 3 dots. If you click on those 3 dots, it gives you the option to download the video. And then you hit that button, download the video, and it'll appear in your phone's gallery. So that's where you can view that. The video that's actually in your pitch report is just going to have that skeleton overlay. It's not going to show the things popping up, but it will show some of those key data points as well as how they compare against our populations, kind of right in the app there.
Great stuff. I love those overlay videos, the overlay B, because it does give you everything right there. You can just watch it straight through, but all of them have some value when you're looking through the reports. We had a couple questions prior to this that I want to get answered. And Mike, I want to bring you in on one, which is what kind of things can you do to help with when you see a high elbow torque? Are there things you think somebody should do, or should you work more on efficiency?
So I think what's important to discuss when we talk about elbow torque is just how much it is not an absolute. So Will, you mentioned when we're referring to elbow torque, we're referring to what's referred to as the valgus torque, which is the torque occurring in that direction of the elbow. Basically, if you've got your arm straight out, it's that kind of medial-lateral torque in that sense. It's not your elbow flexing or extending. It's basically your elbow being pulled side to side. And that's something that you see just in the motion of pitching. Basically, there's very few UCL tears that happen outside of pitching. I think like Jake Delhomme, maybe, thinking about football.
Very few in football. Javelin,
yeah.
the second guy to ever have Tommy John surgery was a Russian javelin person. Lost to history.
So coming back to the torque value, one of the metrics that we put up there is called efficiency. And what efficiency is it's the arm speed divided by the torque and then converted to a percentile. So if you have a very high efficiency, it means that you're having a torque level that's quite low with respect to your arm speed. Because when we look at a lot of our data on the things that contribute to having an elevated torque, number one is being tall. Being tall, being big, and a heavier pitcher will have a higher torque. The second is the arm speed. So the faster the arm moves, the higher the torque will be on that arm. So both of those things are also desirable when it comes to performance. So one of the ways that I typically recommend that you use the torque value is to compare within a pitcher. So see how things change over time. It cannot really be the most useful thing if you're just saying, okay, here's one value and I'm comparing against this other pitcher. Because if a person is a much bigger player and they've got a lot of muscle and they're well trained and their workload's been built up, a high torque is not necessarily a bad thing, and it's also a thing that comes with better performance. So when we try and divide this into health as well as performance, a lot of those variables are very consistent with each other. Higher performing athletes typically do things to get their bodies moving a little bit more efficiently.
Great answer, Mike. And I think that gives a lot of guidance. I think elbow torque is a really interesting thing to know. Like you said, I don't think it's the most important thing to know, except within a pitcher. I don't like when people compare pitch to pitch unless it's super equal. If you've got Aroldis Chapman being compared to Chase Petty, maybe, but even then, rather a rare one. I have a question.
I would actually say that's another good way, Will, though, is to compare, when we've looked at other data sets, torque and velocity, just like torque and arm speed, are very highly related. So it is an interesting way to look at things. If you've got two pitchers throwing 95 miles an hour and one of them has a torque that's much lower than the other, and that's basically the way that things have been used in like the pulse sensor, formerly MODIS. There's a lot of biomechanics reports out there that report basically units of torque per ball velocity. So it is very context dependent. I think that's very important to consider.
Yeah, the other thing you reminded me of was that torque is going to change based on the load. So if you're underweighting or overweighting with the ball, that's definitely something you're going to want to consider. And one of the things Mike Reinold studied 3-4 years ago in his weighted ball study. We've got a question from the chat. Garrett asked, what changes should I expect to see in pitch reports between pitch on a mound and flat ground? I'm not trying to compare the two. I just want to know what may be higher or lower based on the mound versus flat ground. Mike?
Yeah, now typically the mound is going to allow us to get more arm speed. You know, you're moving downhill. We've also seen higher MER values just because the body, one of the things we're calculating with maximum external rotation is how far that arm lays back with respect to the trunk. And when you're moving downhill, that trunk is typically a little bit more forward. You're not having to be as upright. So that is something that you would see in that case there. So a higher MER. You're also likely going to see a bit of a shorter stride length just because you don't have as much room to extend that lead leg there. So I'd say those are kind of your biggest ones when you're going from mound to flat ground. But I also think that's a very interesting comparison that you can run within the system. You know, do a video of a flat ground and a video of throwing off of a mound, and look at how those kinematics change.
Yeah, especially for practice pitchers, if you're doing work on flat ground, does it transfer to the mound? Does it transfer from mound to mound? And the other is long toss has slightly different mechanics just in the way you're going to do it. First, you're on flat ground. How intense you're throwing is definitely going to have something. So I would take a look at all those. And the great thing with Pitch AI is you can simply take your phone, take 3 quick videos, mound, flat ground, long toss, and compare the 3 and be able to see for that specific athlete in those specific situations what he's doing, what he should be doing. Got another question from inside the chat from Eric, and his is, with respect to peak elbow torque, is there an ideal timing window for when the arm path turns red? And red, of course, is the peak arm speed. Mike, you want to start this one?
No, I can't say that I've ever studied that with respect to torque. So we've got a nice data set. We can take a look at that in the future and report back.
Yeah, that's a really good question about peak elbow torque. Again, this surprises people, and maybe you can speak on this a little bit, Mike, especially with guys like Jacob deGrom and others going out with forearm injuries, or a guy like Spencer Turnbull, who had the forearm strain and now is going to have UCL reconstruction, so Tommy John surgery. We really don't know how the forearm contributes to breaking the arm and breaking by stopping, transferring some of the force. Can you give us a little biomechanics on that there, Mike?
On just the forearm musculature and how it contributes? Yeah. So if everybody kind of, do some homework here. If you hold your arm out and you feel kind of where your elbow is here, and then move a little bit towards your hand, you're going to feel there's a muscle right in this space, kind of in here. And that's going to be called the flexor pronator mass. And that muscle group basically starts on the forearm and it spans across the elbow. And during the pitching motion, that muscle group is extremely important in reducing how much of that torque goes to the ligament. So when Will was talking earlier about, the torque being measured and how that's applied to the UCL, it's more applied to how it influences like kind of valgus torque, but those muscles actually take that force away from the ligament and distribute them to the muscle instead. And if if anybody has kind of followed some of the research I've done in the past, which I'm not sure, but a lot of what I've done and even what my research has been in is in muscle fatigue. And what we have found is that if you have to exert that muscle more, it becomes more fatigued. And then over the span of time, basically, as that muscle becomes fatigued and can't generate as much force any longer, it now starts to transmit that force directly to the ligament. And that's why we found that pitching while fatigued is really basically like the only clear-cut thing we've ever seen in biomechanics that everyone agrees on, is that pitching while fatigued is the biggest risk factor for having an injury. So we're seeing it a little bit more now with this sticky ball situation. The guy's having to grip it harder, and that's what Tyler Glasnow was talking about. He's having to grip the ball harder. He's getting more fatigue in his forearm, and that's where we see some of those issues there.
Yeah, it come a long way from pitcher abuse points, pitch counts, to now we can actually see. And again, this is another great use case for Pitch AI. If you're working this fall with some of your pitchers and you're trying to figure out where they are in terms of workload, where they are, you can take a couple videos at his first pitch, 20th pitch, 50th pitch, and see exactly how much his biomechanics are changing, how much that force is changing. You see some pitchers muscle up. A lot of times, especially in no hitters, you see guys actually go up in velocity despite the fatigue. That's one of the most dangerous things. I remember talking to Kurt Schilling, and he was talking about the time he came within 1 out of a no hitter, and said his entire body was so tense from about the 7th inning on, and that he was fatiguing more and more and more, but yet he was throwing harder and harder, which is counterintuitive unless you've been out there. Now, I've certainly never been in a situation like Kurt was there, but I think no hitters are one of the most dangerous things in baseball. A couple more questions here, Mike, and this is a great one. Mitchell asks, is there an ideal place in respect to amount to record a pitch in order to reduce parallax error? There's a built-in kind of error bar, I guess you would call it, an angle from which you can do. But the ideal place is, of course, straight on. For a right-hand pitcher, you're looking straight through third base. For a left-handed pitcher, through first base. You want to give a little more detail on that, Mike?
Yeah, so one of the cool things that both Casey at Kinetic Pro has done, as well as Lennon and Tyler at Baseball Development Group have done, is they put like a marker on the floor. Basically, this is where we do our Pitch AI collection from. Now, in terms of the data itself, we do have about a window of about 15 degrees. If you look through that viewfinder in the app, it kind of positions it so that the pitcher starts on the left side of the screen and strides forward. I kind of use like as a rule of thumb of like try to film where the person lands, like where that pitcher is landing. That's kind of your ideal spot. So it's like, if that right-hander is striding down, where their trunk is at foot plant, that's kind of the ideal line that I like to take, which is maybe if like it's like a 4 or 5 feet in front of the rubber. That's kind of position A.
Yeah, when you're talking about 15 degrees, that's basically from essentially the line of the rubber, correct? 15 degrees
Correct.
to the right or left?
Yeah.
So yeah, ideal is of course straight on, but there's a little bit of error. I always tell people get as straight as you possibly can. If you think you're straight, you're probably pretty good. But the AI does some pretty amazing things. Last question is more of a comment from Joshua. One change to the app is that you no longer highlight the peak red for hips and trunk. I like the new format for the video, but was fond of that. Is that coming back? He found it helpful for sequencing.
Yeah, for sure it is. That was an accidental removal, just in terms of when we did our last production release, we put in all these new formats for our files, which is not interesting to anyone, but it made the processing time a lot faster. But we didn't pass one important variable to make those pelvis, trunk, shoulder turn red. So that should be back next week.
Mitchell, got your comment. And yes, that's one I'm fond of. I will pass that on to engineering as well.
That's another one I was talking about this morning with the engineers. So that one's coming back too.
Yeah, I have a complex password that I have to keep thinking of. Do we have any further questions? Otherwise, we're going to close this up. Remember, we are recording this, so we'll send this out to everybody so you can check this. You can pass this on to colleagues. And we'll be doing these webinars very regularly in the future. So get used to seeing Mike's kitchen there. Listen, I want to thank everybody for coming today. Thanks to Dr. Mike Sonne. Thanks to everybody at ProPlay who helped set this up. I really want to thank everybody. And if you have any questions, make sure to contact us. There was one other question, which was someone asked how they could compare it, the elite level. On my Twitter feed, I put something that Mike had put out that was a range of people, the medians, the 95th percentiles. That is on my Twitter feed, which is at Injury Expert. You can also do that at Dr. Mike Sonne, and I'll see if we can get that out at the ProPlay AI. A quick question that came in for Josh. Does the parallax error change for day to night games? I think the answer is no. Comes down to
It
lighting, right?
doesn't, but one of the things I would say there, right, is if you look at a video and you have a hard time discerning where like a foot is or where an ankle is in space, the computer vision can have a challenge with it too. And I've seen a couple of videos, even when we were doing that stuff for ESPN, there's a couple of guys that were wearing all black pitching in night games. That and it is difficult. Like it's a limitation for sure when we only do have the one camera there. So if you're seeing that feet swapping, that's obviously that's not great. If you can, what I've done in the past is kind of just use the auto feature in the gallery. And there's some stuff in our videos about how you just like edit your slow motion, make sure it's uniform throughout. But I boosted some of the gain in the image, and that has solved that problem.
Awesome. Again, thanks to Dr. Mike Sonne, everybody at ProPlay. We will see you next time. And again, thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.